doesn't that just push the liability to the app creator? Whether it's sports, arts, politics, any of microblogging does that better.
And the posts about the protest are being actually removed from Twitter, from Instagram, and from Bluesky.
If I want to see what people are thinking and I go to a microblogging site like Twitter, and you can see all of the people who you have chosen to follow who are reacting in real time.
I think a lot of people I know actually move to Bluesky as kind of a statement.
You know what? I like being able to connect to my audience, and I want a different version of that.
Welcome to the Ready, Set, Click podcast, where we talk digital marketing strategies. Grab a coffee or something a little stronger and settle in for this episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ready, Set, Click podcast. I'm Paul Kahn. I'm here with Kevin Cruzy. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing great, Paul. I'm actually excited about today's episode.
I am excited too. You want to know why? Because the landscape of social media, you know, it used to be this Wild West evolutionary kind of fun thing. Hey, one day it's Friendster, then there's MySpace, then there's Facebook. It's been a little static there for a while. You know, I mean, when's the last time we had a really disruptive presence? I guess it would be TikTok.
Yeah.
And that's going back a few years now, and TikTok's a behemoth. So we get to actually talk about something new for a change, and that's kind of fun. Today we're going to be talking about Bluesky.
Yeah. Bluesky, so kind of newish platform. I think the concept of Bluesky, which I'm using Bluesky. So full disclosure, I tried it out. It's part of my job too. It's part of your job too.
Mm-hmm.
And as a user, I had no idea what it was built on or what it was actually serving or what its mission was. It's a totally different vision of social media and how social media could function. It's based on a protocol that they have created that's called the ad protocol, which is basically a reversed social media architecture. So let me explain that in like layman's term. They break down the components of a social media, so the user, the platform, the algorithms, and so on, into different buckets. The user controls its own data. The platform controls its own view, so the app, and that's it. And the algorithms can be grabbed from outside the platform. And as a user, I can pick whatever algorithm I want to see in my feed. I can create specific algorithms for my feed, just like a playlist on Spotify that other people can actually use to generate content that they like. Bluesky, literally, basically, it's Twitter. They just started adding little videos. They have 36 million users, right? So it's pretty big. It grew significantly post election in the US, following the controversy around Twitter. It grabbed a lot of like left-leaning users.
Disaffected users, I think is a fair thing to say.
Yeah, people that wanted to make a stance or whatever. And fundamentally, it's just this. I think some of the biggest like people on Bluesky right now are going to be like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, to give a sense of where it's kind of leaning. You have also like very famous author. I follow John Scalzi, great sci-fi author.
Yeah, and like the Green Brothers, the Vlog brothers are both there. Mark Hamill, George Takei, Stephen King. A lot of people who said, you know what, I like being able to connect to my audience, and I want a different version of that.
But yeah, it's kind of, I felt like, okay, so just, you know, an entrepreneur got upset and decided to launch a Twitter alternative, but it is totally not just this. It is also probably a little bit this. But
it's a little bit, but I mean, that's kind of more the story of Threads on a certain level.
Well, I know.
If you want to think about
Threads
it, right?
is another example of Mark Zuckerberg being very opportunistic, right? The same way they grabbed stories from Snapchat. They were like, people want to leave Twitter. Well,
people
we'll
want to microblog. Hey, we can help you microblog. It'd be a shame if you couldn't microblog. You know?
Yeah, and so I think today's episode really interesting. We're gonna talk about microblogging, where it's at right now in the world. What is it still relevant? Like all these new platforms. But I think the focus on Bluesky and on decentralized social medias is going to be honestly my favorite topic to talk about right now. And I just think this is really interesting that they managed to get that success, and they, contrary to like other like historical networks, like Mastodon is another view of like a decentralized network, and people might not know about it, but it has about 10 million users. But it's a lot more tech heavy. You need to have some tech understanding to actually use it and and practice it. Even though it's simpler now than it used to be, but still, right? It's still something you need to do. But they still have managed to grow. And I think by distancing themselves from the initial mission statement while still building it, that's probably the right angle, right? You just portray yourself as an alternative to something else. You don't necessarily need to be like, hey, the great fighter for freedom in the world of social media, but essentially you are, and nobody knows about it. So the ad protocol is a totally different vision from what we see with Instagram, with YouTube, with TikTok, where they want to control all your data and lock you up into an ecosystem with your friends, your followers. With the ad protocol, you can build social media apps. Right now it's Bluesky, but you also have other social media apps that are using the protocol or that are starting to use the protocol. And you can do really anything. You could build, technically speaking, a YouTube based on the ad protocol, right? And the benefit of Bluesky and what they're doing is, as a user, I control my data. Whatever I live out on Bluesky, I decide to live there. But the minute I decide that Bluesky is not serving my need anymore, I disagree with it, or I'm not happy with how they serve ads, for example, I can actually move to a Bluesky alternative app. So it's going to be the same purpose as Bluesky's, the same users as Bluesky's, maybe the same features as Bluesky, but maybe they'll have a different moderation technique, or maybe they'll have less advertisers that I don't like. And so I can actually move with my followers, with the people I like, with my posts, with my history into that new version of the platform.
Well, it can be great, but it also points to another potential issue that, is there. If anybody can grab it, what does that mean? Especially, there are definitely actors out there who are looking at surveilling everybody, right?
Yes.
And have various reasons why. So is there a concern that all that data is out? It's not as private as some of the other social networks might lead you to believe?
Yeah, and so to clarify this for people listening to us, the entire concept of ad protocol is that everything is open by nature. Only very rare events are not public, because to access things and to make it open and to make it decentralized, you actually need everything to be public. So it's a big issue. Let's say if you want to have a use case in China where there is major censorship, right? And anybody can access your full history, that's a real issue. On the bright side of it is you can create an account in a more anonymous manner, right? Because the protocol being open also leaves you like ways to authenticate yourselves that might be a little more favorable. But on the brighter side, you also know that if you delete something, it is deleted, right? And that's an important aspect. Is like sometimes you delete a post from social media, but you're like, well, I'm on, let's say Instagram. I delete one of my pictures because I didn't like it, but you never know where it's going to end up, right? Yeah. Maybe it's in a database somewhere and it's going to be used to train an AI and you're going to find it in an ad 10 years later. There has been cases like this before. So that's really the big downside is right now the architecture is not made very well to have a dual private public use case for your data. And I think that's something that they're working on. In their research paper, they actually mentioned that they're looking into ways to make these two use cases, coexist. For example, the DM use case plus the social media posting. So a DM is one-on-one, it's private, but the social media post is public by essence, or the private community and so on. So we are not there yet, but we're making progress. I still think this is really interesting. And I want to touch up on one last topic, which for Bluesky and the ad protocol, which I think is super interesting because social media are struggling with liability right now, right? They're liable for whoever posts content and they're liable for administering it and moderating it.
That's actually interesting, right? There is a very specific section of US law specifically. So if you're thinking about it in Europe, the case is that there is liability in Europe, but in the US, they're protected.
In the US, I know there is exemption, but in Europe specifically, they are in charge of moderating their own platform and they're responsible for whoever says what on it. Just like on a newspaper, for example.
And when you say that, that means that there are content guidelines, moderation guidelines, and things of that nature?
Yeah, you have to pay thousands of people to make sure that the content that is released online is accepted by the guidelines of the government that you're in, right? Which is really, really complicated because you're dealing with hundreds of governments with different guidelines, right? And not that it means that Bluesky is immune from this. They are not. But it means that the content itself that you post might be banned on Bluesky in one country, but maybe there is another app that didn't ban it somewhere else, right? So as a journalist, for example, that lives in a country where the freedom of the press is not obvious, right? You might have a better shot at getting your ideas out there if you just post it on a decentralized social media, or at least an architecture, right? Because then you can have dozens of different platforms that can take your information and share it to the community, right? Because it all originates from your personal data server, the PDS, right? That holds all your data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say on Bluesky in Turkey, it might not be visible, but on another service that is connected to the same data server where you have your post, your microblogging activity as a journalist, you might still be able to get exposure to the world, right? And it's a great thing, I think, on average for hate speech, for a lot of these things. But I'll give you an example. Right now, there are protests in Turkey, and the post about the protest and where to gather and just like how to protest peacefully are being actually removed from Twitter, from Instagram, and from Bluesky by request of the Turkish government, right? So this is a really good example of like, if you have a decentralized platform, you can actually take these posts, and you know that Bluesky is too big, so they're going to go after Bluesky right away. So you actually take that little guy that has just like 1,000 subscribers to his feed, and he also does his own like data indexing and make sure that he has an alternative to Bluesky with all the posts. So you can use this, and then you can actually refuse to comply with the request depending on where you are. And if you're not big enough, you don't have advertisers, you don't care, right?
So I think that's fascinating, and it brings up two questions, right? So on a certain level, doesn't that just push the liability to the app creator from the decentralized location? Because because I don't see that the countries are going to stop having guidelines that need to be followed. So it sort of pushes it down to whoever's spinning up these apps, yeah?
And it's also broken down into so many different players that you, as a country, and I'm talking essentially about the aspect of it where you are censored, right?
Yeah, like an autocracy.
For censorship, it's really, really important for me. And I think it's really easy for all of these countries to deal with like 3 or 4 big social media platforms, right? But if it's 300 or 400, it's a lot harder. If it's 3,000, if it's variants of the same platform times, like hundreds of thousands of different alternatives that serve different feeds and moderate in different ways, which is literally what's built right now, right? You can have an alternative of Bluesky, and it serves a different feed that hasn't been moderated by Bluesky. So you can actually decide to see whatever you want to see. That's the entire point, right?
Right. And so there's always two sides to every coin, because what you're talking about is definitely true. But if you do believe that there is a prescient interest in keeping away from misinformation or hate speech, it could also make that a more difficult thing when you have that decentralized kind of a platform.
Yeah, correct. And also the users being more anonymous is another issue, right? So there is no perfect world, right? It just depends where you want to be on the spectrum of like controlled content. So like the press, for example, where every word that comes out of the newspaper is, the responsibility of the newspaper, or where you want to be on, I don't know, like a Reddit forum like version of the world where millions and millions of users post stuff every day and you're just here to display it, right? Europe has decided to take an approach here where they make the social network abide by their rules, right? So I think it's also another way for people to protest, right? It's just a way to make that point known. One thing, because I asked all my friends who use Bluesky, I was like, hey, do you know Bluesky is decentralized? And I live in a pretty kind of like, my world is pretty tech, forward. And none of them actually knew either how it worked or what the benefits were or why decentralized was fundamentally different than whatever Meta is offering. And they had no idea.
I think it's very interesting because you're talking about protocols. So much of the internet is built on protocols, which are agnostic in a certain sense. And social media is kind of the cul-de-sac where people are being sort of held in one place. And I think that's really interesting. When you build off of these protocols, it allows for more innovation, more creativity, and a little less of a sense that you're being squeezed for every potential dollar that you're bringing to the social media network.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically back to the basics for the internet, right? The same protocols that power the email system is an open protocol used by any DNS, right? So you can have a gmail.com and outlook.com, but I can also have email servers that I build inside my own company with my own DNS, right? So a domain name server. So all of this really is going back to the basics of what made internet successful to begin with, and that's disappearing because now on social media you have communications app, right? But guess what? These apps are not accessible from the outside world. The benefit, maybe less spam, but the real benefit is you're locked in, right? You can't actually talk to your friends on Instagram if you're not on Instagram. That makes you connect. Every time you connect, we can serve you ads. So this is a virtuous cycle for the platform that provides it, but it's not necessarily a virtuous cycle for the user himself, who might end up having harder use cases to adopt just because they want to chat with their mom, right? So, and that's just the simple example of communication, but it's true of so many different things, right? Accessing a website uses a HTTP protocol, right? All of these are open, and they were built to be as inclusive as possible, right? You can be in North Korea and still access the World Wide Web, right? We're not letting anybody out.
It's very similar to a lot of the arguments around cryptocurrency, if you think about it, right? Like the benefits to cryptocurrency are very similar. It's to make transactions easier between people, as opposed to needing to go through centralized organizations. It allows for a little bit of anonymity, and a lot of that can be very good. But then if the government has an interest in making sure that money's not going to these people over here or there, it makes it more complicated.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. It's exactly the same use case, right? If you go to Cuba, you know that your currency is totally unreliable because the government could print money, devalue it, whatever. What do? You get your actual money however you can, and you buy cryptocurrency because it's shielded from this, right? And actually cryptocurrency as a currency is used a lot more in like all of these developing uncertain countries than in like established democracies in the West, right? So it's exactly the same thing. And a lot of the concepts they mention, like the fact that you have a full history, the fact that there is an index, that it can be verified and cross-verified across different servers are concepts that are somewhat borrowed and come initially from the crypto world or the.
So as multiple social media have, there's an algorithm that exists to show you things that the algorithm believes that you would like, and doesn't necessarily allow too many things to cross over from one thing to another. So you kind of see all the same people over and over again within threads, which
My
is a different.
understanding is that Twitter likes very controversial topics that generate a lot of like reactions, whether they're good or bad, whereas Threads is more like supposed to be your Zen garden a little bit. And it's supposed to be a little more peaceful and narrow around your interests.
And so then people got bored.
Yeah. Yes, that's my take, right? I think people love being upset, right, and angry. In a way,
I think people will interact if they're upset.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I also think it depends. If people are upset sometimes, that drives them to action. If they're upset all the time, they're going to tune it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what started to happen with X, where people felt like the algorithm was pushing things toward them and they didn't have a way to say, I don't want this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people I know actually moved to Bluesky as kind of a statement too, right? They were like, okay, well, I don't want to be associated with any product of, that person. And it might not even be like politically left leaning. Some of them are politically right leaning, but just don't like Elon Musk. And decided to move to Bluesky. I think they use it pretty well and are pretty happy with it.
I think there are 2 or 3 major use cases that microblogging solves for that all of these other things don't. The first is speed. In real time, waiting for a video, even if you're watching a sporting event, right? And I'm watching a lot of basketball right now, it's basketball playoffs. Somebody does an amazing dunk. If you want to make a video piece of content that reacts to that, it's going to take you a minute, 2 minutes, something like that. But if I want to see what people are thinking and I go to a microblogging site like Twitter or X or Bluesky, I will see within 5 seconds someone going like, oh my God, And you can see all of the people who you have chosen to follow who are reacting in real time to what you're reacting to. Or if somebody wins an Oscar and you just are like, yeah, go, and just that sense of invented fast community that is able to respond to an event, whether it's sports, arts, politics, any of it. Microblogging does that better. There are workarounds on the other sites, which are lives, right?
Yeah.
But you get to see one person's reaction. If you're on a microblog site, you get to see everybody's reaction in real time, and it's very democratic.
Yeah.
You see your friend's reaction, you see Mark Hamill's reaction, you see whoever you're seeing, and you see that all in one place, and that's very important.
Do you think fundamentally it's for news and kind of like more like that kind of content? Because I also see it as there is less of a barrier to entry to produce content, and it's really, really easy to just take 5 seconds and write something. Whereas a video might be simple, but it needs a little more, like you need the right setup, you need not to have background noise, right? So it's like...
There's also the lottery ticket value of it, okay? Your video on TikTok, maybe it's going to go someplace, but that's not really the design for a nobody's thing to go someplace. There is a sense that if you say the right thing in the right pithy way, and it is retweeted or reshared or anything like that, thousands and millions of people might see your point of view and react to it in a way. And I do believe that there's a thrill that people have of that virality, but also the idea that somebody who you think of as important will validate this.
So if you had to pick, and just as a closing thought, do you have a network you'd like to be decentralized? You could pick one. I have one in mind.
I have one I'd love to be decentralized because I love it so much, but I'm scared of it, so I haven't been using it. So I would love it if we had a decentralized TikTok.
Really? Okay.
And you could really
pick your algorithms.
You could
stuff,
really tweak your algorithm.
Nice.
Yeah, that would be.
But it's so good though. The algorithm of TikTok.
It's too
so
good. That's the problem.
So you could make it less good.
You make it less good so you don't spend an hour on it. Like at the moment,
you could make it like smart TikTok, only like stuff that teaches you something and not like cute dogs,
Or you can make it really dumb TikTok and just like veg out and
depending on your mood.
Depending on your mood. Wouldn't that be lovely?
Yeah, I'd love that.
You could pick Discover or Discover Smart, Discover Dumb, Discover Cute, Discover
On my side, I actually thought about it, and I the one I'd love to see the most is LinkedIn, because I think I'd love to be able to own a little bit like my relationships for work and have a more open access to the people I'm connected to professionally, and not having to rely on what is essentially kind of a pay-to-play social media, right? Where you basically need to have a premium account to do anything relevant, right?
Social media, if you are not doing it based on advertising, how is it paying for itself?
Well, you can use the LinkedIn model, and I think that's what Jack Dorsey and his team, right? When they did the research paper for Bluesky and the ad protocol architecture, right? They actually said that running the entire 10 million user database, right? Just running the database was $160 a month. Which is, I understand it's some money, right? It's not nothing. But if you want to build a side project, for example, that has some revenue through donations, it's very manageable. What was a lot more expensive?
Like a Substack kind of
model?
I
mean, donation. But what I mean is like it doesn't matter because it's cheap enough that you can run the database and the sub-social network or the social network itself for a few $1,000s a month. The one thing that's expensive is the indexation of all the content and the update of all the content, but you can actually plug to other things, right? Which is always the expensive thing. But we're not talking about like hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking about like thousands of dollars, right? Which some people make more than this on Patreon, just publishing videos on YouTube.
100%. But how do you, if the network doesn't grow, right? If in terms of functionality and all of those types of things, what you just made me think of, because I'm old, is Craigslist.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Craigslist, but the model for Craigslist, vintage. It's still there, right? And it still makes tons of money because they keep everything as cheap as possible. But you go back and look at it, and it looks like it was built in 1995.
It was built before that, I believe.
Oh, yeah. But so and maybe it's I'm trying to think through how there are different models for this, and one of them could be a philanthropic model, frankly.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah, like a philanthropic model or a donation-based model, but
also like at some point just selling your index data, right, to like anybody that. So if it's all open data, it's B2B, right? You could sell it to CRMs or stuff like this. Like there is, one thing too is like you don't need to make tens of billions of dollars to run a social media. You need that to be valued $1 trillion, like Google and like Meta, right? If you decentralize it, anybody who runs a small 10 people team project would be more than happy to make $10 million a year, right? And that is totally realistic outside of the advertising model.
Prediction time.
Okay.
Bluesky had about 10 million users in October 2024. It is April 2025. They're at 35 million users. What is your prediction for their number of users by the end of this year?
Okay, so I hate myself for saying this, but I don't think they're going to grow much more. They will grow over time, but it's not going to be as explosive as it was. So I don't expect that to be the fundamental trend line. I expect to end the year around probably 50 million users, which already, because they have more of a US-based community of users, I think it's already pretty good.
Okay, so you say 50 million. I'm going to take the over, but only because I think you're about right. I was going to say 53 million. That was the number that was in my that was the number.
And
that
you
was
get
in my
over,
head.
That's cheating, Paul.
Oh, all right, fine.
You get everything over 50.
All right, so why don't we say everything between 35 million and 51,500,000.
I win.
You win. And 51,500,001 and everything higher.
Okay,
I
that's
win.
cheating. Okay,
why is that? No. I'm giving you 1.5 million people.
I would argue that I hope you win.
You hope
I hope Bluesky does really, really good. I hope they grow super fast. And more than that, I hope that more social media are launched and succeed doing the same thing.
And final question. At what point does Bluesky join Upfluence?
Not quite yet. It's still very small. The second thing is I think microblogging. We have X on Upfluence, but I think microblogging is not the best content format for most brands. It's just a little dry and doesn't help showcase much of the value proposition of what our brands want to do. So in the future, maybe they're doing a lot of new things with videos on Bluesky. So it's kind of like Reels, TikTok style. So we'll see. If they keep growing like this, maybe next year.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today for this conversation about Bluesky and the rise of decentralized social media networks. Thanks so much for being here, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for hosting. That was a great moment.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ready, Set, Click podcast. Love this episode? Hit the subscribe button, give us a like, or leave a review. Until next time.